I opened my eyes and realized I was in a place that doesn't exist on any map. Towering mountains surrounded me, but they weren't like the ones I knew. Their walls were unnaturally smooth, as if carved by colossal blades. And inside those cliffs, windows glowed faintly, as though the mountains themselves were hollow cities. I froze, listening. The mountains were humming. A deep, endless vibration filled the air, as if thousands of unseen machines were working beneath the stone. Each tremor echoed through my chest, like the earth itself was breathing. In that moment, I understood. My life had split into before and after. Everything I thought I knew about the world was a lie. Inside these mountains was something no one was supposed to see, something I shouldn't speak about. But I will. Subscribe now, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of truth they never want revealed. When I first stood on my feet, the ground beneath me felt alien. The soil was dark, almost black, and it vibrated faintly under my boots, as if something alive was pulsing deep within the earth. Around me rose colossal cliffs, their surfaces so impossibly smooth that I couldn't believe they were natural. These weren't mountains shaped by wind or rain. These were walls, carved with precision, as if a hand larger than life itself had sculpted them. The sky overhead was pale and washed out, not the blue I was used to. The air shimmered in the distance, like heat waves on an endless desert, yet the temperature was cool. It was a paradox, a place that broke all logic. I rubbed my temples, trying to remember how I had gotten here, but my memory was a blur, a blank slate, where the last few hours of my life should have been. I walked forward slowly, my footsteps echoing unnaturally loud against the stone walls. That's when I noticed the impossible details. In the cliffs, cut high above the ground, were windows. Dozens of them, each one glowing with a pale light from within. They weren't torches or firelight. The glow was too steady, too white, like the sterile lamps of a hospital. My breath caught in my throat. Entire structures, entire cities were hidden inside these mountains. The silence of the valley was deceptive. At first it seemed empty, dead, abandoned. But then I heard it, the sound that would haunt me long after. A low, unending hum. It was deep, mechanical, metallic, and yet alive, like the breathing of a giant machine buried under stone. It wasn't just sound. I could feel it in my bones. Every vibration rattled my chest and made my teeth ache. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the valley. The cliffs surrounded me on all sides, forming a prison with no exit. There were no roads, no paths, no trees, no rivers. Just endless stone, perfectly smooth, with faint cracks running like veins across the surface. I tried to convince myself this was some kind of dream, but everything was too vivid. The smell of mineral dust in the air, the faint taste of iron on my tongue, the way the wind carried the vibration of that endless hum. I shouted, half in fear, half in desperation. My voice bounced off the walls, echoing again and again until it sounded like 1,000 voices calling back. But no one came. No one answered. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. As I moved closer to one of the glowing windows, I noticed something strange about the stone. It wasn't chipped or rough, like quarried rock. It was polished smooth, almost like glass, but cold under my touch. How could something so enormous be carved with such precision? Who could have built this? And why? The hum grew louder the closer I got to the cliff wall. I pressed my ear against the stone and felt it vibrate like the skin of a drum. The thought struck me suddenly. This mountain wasn't just hollow. It was alive. I stepped back, heart pounding, when I noticed movement in the corner of my vision. For a split second, I thought I saw a shadow pass across one of the glowing windows high above. A figure. Someone or something was inside. Watching. I stumbled backward, trying to get a better look, but the window darkened as if a curtain had been drawn. The light dimmed, leaving only the cold stone and that terrible hum. The realization hit me like ice water down my spine. I wasn't supposed to be here. And then, just as the fear began to take hold, the ground beneath my feet trembled softly at first, then stronger. Dust rained down from the cliffs. The hum rose into a roar, deep and thunderous, vibrating through every nerve in my body. I fell to my knees, clutching my head as the sound grew unbearable. The entire valley seemed to pulse, as though the mountain itself was waking up. And then, silence. The humming stopped, cut off so suddenly it left my ears ringing. That was when I realized something inside the mountain had noticed me. The silence after the hum faded was worse than the sound itself. My chest still ached from the vibrations, and the echo of that mechanical roar seemed to hang in the air, as though the mountain had exhaled and was waiting to breathe again. I stood frozen, scanning the cliffs, when I noticed something at the far end of the valley, a break in the seamless wall of stone. It looked like a shadow at first, a darker shape in the already dark cliffside. But as I approached, the shape widened and revealed itself for what it truly was, an opening. An archway so massive it dwarfed me, carved with such precision that it could not have been the work of human hands. The top curved perfectly, and strange geometric markings lined its surface, faintly glowing with the same pale light I had seen in the windows above. My stomach tightened. I didn't know what drew me closer. Curiosity, fear, or something else entirely. But I stepped through. Inside, the air was colder. The archway opened into a tunnel, long and high, as though the mountain had been hollowed out from within. The walls glistened faintly, cut smooth from the stone, and the hum returned, softer now, but constant, a pulse that came from deep inside the rock. My footsteps echoed sharply, but I wasn't the only sound. There was movement. At first, I thought it was the whisper of wind, but then I saw them. Figures. People. They walked the tunnel in slow, steady lines, all heading inward. Each of them wore the same gray garments, simple, shapeless robes that reached their ankles. Their heads were bowed, their eyes fixed on the ground. None of them spoke. None of them looked at one another. They moved with such mechanical precision that it was as though they were being guided by an unseen conductor, marching to the rhythm of that endless hum. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to stay unnoticed, but no one glanced my way. It was as if I didn't exist to them. The tunnel widened, and suddenly I was standing at the edge of something that made my breath stop. A city. Not a village or a settlement, but a sprawling city carved entirely inside the mountain. The ceiling rose so high above me it felt like looking at the night sky, except instead of stars, there were thousands of glowing windows and stone-carved lamps lining the walls. Roads stretched in straight lines, each chiseled from the same dark rock. Buildings were stacked like honeycombs into the cliff faces, their windows glowing faintly, their doors opening and closing in silent rhythm. It was breathtaking and horrifying, a civilization hidden within stone. I walked slowly along one of the main streets, trying to blend in with the silent gray figures. The sound of their footsteps echoed like rain, uniform, steady, perfectly timed. I noticed there were no animals, no carts, no smoke from fires, no signs of normal life, only silence, stone, and that hum. Shops lined the streets, their stone counters bare. And yet people stepped inside, pretended to take items, and exchanged nothing before walking away. It was all an act, an imitation of life, a theater performed for no one. I stopped at a corner, heart racing, when it happened. Someone looked at me. It was a man, or at least he appeared to be. His face was pale, expressionless, his robe the same as the others. But his eyes locked onto mine with sudden intensity. My breath caught in my throat. For a second, he seemed frozen, his lips trembling as though he was about to speak. Then he leaned slightly closer as he passed me, and in the faintest whisper, almost too quiet to hear, he said, "You are not supposed to be here." I turned, desperate to follow him, but he vanished into the crowd, swallowed by the river of gray robes. I stood frozen in the street, the words echoing in my skull. My presence wasn't just unusual, it was forbidden. This city wasn't meant for me, or for anyone like me. The hum deepened, vibrating through the walls, and I realized the entire place seemed to react to my fear. The lamps flickered. The stone itself seemed to groan, alive and aware. Somewhere deep inside the mountain, something new I had entered. The words echoed in my mind long after the man in gray had disappeared. "You are not supposed to be here." I tried to shake it off, but the weight of those 7 words clung to me like chains. The city seemed to press closer around me, as though the walls themselves were listening. I forced myself to keep walking. The streets were wide, yet eerily empty. Not empty of people. There were plenty of figures in their identical robes, but empty of life. Every step was measured, every movement rehearsed. It was as though they were following a script, repeating the same gestures over and over. I passed a row of stone-carved shops. At first glance, they looked like marketplaces, with counters and shelves. But there was nothing there, no food, no tools, nothing at all. And yet the gray figures entered them, mimed taking objects, handed over invisible currency, and walked away as though satisfied. Their faces never changed. Blank, pale, expressionless. A chill ran through me. It wasn't a city. It was a performance, a simulation of life. But who was the audience? I quickened my pace, trying to blend in, though I felt like a single red flame among gray shadows. I could feel eyes on me, though when I turned, no one was looking. The hum in the walls never stopped. It rose and fell like breathing, a rhythm that seemed to guide the steps of everyone around me. At the center of the city was a fountain, or at least what resembled one. Water flowed through carved channels that wound up the sides of the stone walls and cascaded into a circular basin. The water was clear, almost too clear, and it glowed faintly in the dim light. I leaned closer and dipped my fingers in. It was ice cold, too cold. And when I pulled my hand back, the skin tingled, as if tiny sparks danced across my flesh. The sensation crept up my arm before fading, leaving only a lingering ache. Something about this place wasn't natural. I turned to leave the fountain when I saw them. Children. They stood in a narrow alleyway, watching me with heads tilted slightly to one side. There were 4 of them, dressed in the same gray robes as the adults, but smaller, thinner. At first, I was almost relieved. Children meant innocence, normalcy. But as they stepped closer, the blood in my veins froze. Their faces were wrong, smooth, featureless. No eyes, no mouths, only pale skin where their features should have been, as though someone had forgotten to finish shaping them. My knees buckled slightly, and I stumbled back. But the children didn't move aggressively. Instead, they crouched near the wall and began to draw. With pieces of white chalk, they scratched symbols onto the black stone. The symbols were angular, geometric, repeating patterns that twisted and overlapped like a language I had never seen before. Some resembled spirals, others looked like jagged runes. As they drew, the chalk seemed to glow faintly, the symbols pulsing in rhythm with the hum that filled the city. I couldn't look away. The symbols radiated an energy that made my skin crawl, and yet I felt a pull, as though they were meant for me. One of the children stopped drawing. Its faceless head turned toward me. Even without eyes, I felt its gaze pierce me. My breath caught. It raised its hand and slowly traced a shape in the air, a triangle with a circle inside. The air itself seemed to ripple. Suddenly, the hum deepened, reverberating through the city. The fountain behind me glowed brighter, the water churning violently before calming again. The gray figures in the streets stopped moving for a fraction of a second, their heads twitching toward me in perfect unison, before resuming their silent, synchronized march. My heart pounded. I was no longer just an intruder. I was a disruption. The children dropped their chalk and vanished into the crowd like shadows dissolving into darkness. I ran after them, desperate for answers, but they were gone, swallowed by the faceless sea of gray. I stopped, gasping for breath, when I noticed the wall where they had drawn. The symbol still glowed faintly, etched into the stone. I reached out, hesitated, then pressed my fingers against one of them. The stone pulsed beneath my touch, and then I heard it. Not the hum, not the echo of machines. A voice. It wasn't external. It was inside my head, cold, hollow, and inhuman. You should not be here. The voice lingered in my skull long after the glow of the symbols had faded. You should not be here. It wasn't spoken with words, not in any language I knew. It was something deeper, pressed directly into my mind like a memory that wasn't mine. My hands trembled as I pulled them away from the stone, but the pulse beneath my skin didn't stop. It felt as though something had followed me, crawling beneath the surface of my veins. I staggered back into the street. The gray-robed figures continued their silent march, unaffected. They moved like phantoms, as if none of them had noticed the flare of light, the shifting of stone, the voice. But I couldn't shake the sense that everything, the people, the walls, the air itself was watching me. I wandered for what felt like hours through the maze of carved streets. Every building looked the same, windowless, featureless blocks of stone. It was impossible to orient myself. My throat grew dry, my stomach knotted with hunger. But there was nothing to drink, nothing to eat, only the faint glow of the windows above and that unceasing hum in the walls. And then I noticed something different. A narrow passage opened between two buildings, darker than the rest of the city. It sloped downward, as though burrowing deeper into the mountain. A faint metallic tang filled the air, sharp and bitter, like the scent of blood or rust. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but something stronger. Curiosity, or perhaps something the city itself had planted inside me, pulled me forward. The passage widened into a vast chamber. I froze at the threshold. The ceiling arched high above, lined with faintly glowing veins of crystal. The walls were covered in massive stone doors, each one towering at least twice my height. The air was heavy, thick with the sound of muffled cries. They weren't loud, but they were everywhere, echoing faintly from behind the sealed doors. Whispers, sobs, screams that bled together into an endless chorus of suffering. I gagged on the metallic stench. It was stronger here, saturating the air until every breath burned my throat. My legs shook as I moved closer to one of the doors. Its surface was smooth, without handles or hinges, carved with the same geometric symbols I had seen the faceless children draw. The cries on the other side grew louder the closer I stood. My hand rose, trembling, before I could stop it. I pressed my palm against the stone. The symbols lit up. The door shifted with a groan of stone grinding against stone. Dust rained down as the slab moved aside, revealing what lay beyond. Rows of transparent capsules stretched into the darkness, each one filled with liquid that glowed faintly from within. Inside each capsule was a human. Some were asleep or appeared to be. Others floated with eyes wide open, pupils fixed on nothing. Their bodies twitched faintly, as though alive but restrained by whatever substance held them suspended. I stumbled forward, horrified. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of them. Men, women, even children. Their chests rose and fell in perfect unison, timed to the rhythm of the hum that filled the mountain. As I pressed closer to one of the capsules, the truth struck me like ice. They weren't breathing on their own. The mountain was breathing for them. I slapped my hand against the glass. The figure inside was a man, maybe in his 40s, his skin pale and waxen, his eyes half open. For a moment, I thought I saw his gaze shift toward me. His lips moved soundlessly. My heart pounded as I leaned closer. His mouth formed a single word, silent but clear. Run. The hum rose sharply, vibrating through the chamber, until the stone itself seemed to scream. Lights flickered. The capsule shuddered, bubbles rising furiously in the glowing fluid. The doors lining the walls began to pulse with light, symbols igniting one by one, as though the entire chamber had awakened. Behind me, footsteps echoed. Slow, heavy, in perfect unison. I turned. The gray-robed figures had followed me, dozens of them, their faces blank, their eyes fixed straight ahead. They filled the passage, blocking any escape. The man in the capsule banged his hand weakly against the glass, his mouth forming the word again and again. Run. 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 But there was nowhere left to run. The rows of gray-robed figures filled the chamber, blocking the only exit. Their footsteps echoed in unison, slow and deliberate, as though choreographed by some invisible hand. My chest tightened. The air felt heavier, thicker, pressing down on me with every breath. I staggered back, trapped between the wall of blank faces and the glowing capsules that stretched into darkness. The man inside the capsule pounded weakly on the glass, his lips still forming that desperate word. Run. But my legs refused to move. The hum inside the mountain grew louder, deep enough to rattle my teeth, shaking the chamber until dust rained from the ceiling. And then, from the crowd, one figure broke the pattern. He wasn't taller or stronger than the others, but there was something different in his eyes. They weren't blank like the rest. He stepped forward, closer to me, and in a voice so low I could barely hear it over the hum, he whispered, "You don't belong here, but you need to know the truth." I froze. My throat was dry, but I managed to croak. "What is this place? Who are they? What's inside the capsules?" His face twitched, as though every word he spoke tore him apart. This city was not built by humans. We live here, but we don't own it. We never did. We are guests. No, not even guests. We are specimens. The word struck me like a knife. Specimens, I repeated, stepping closer. He nodded. This place is older than memory. It was carved into the mountains by something that came before us. Something that uses us. These walls, they are not stone. They are alive. The hum you hear, it's not machines. It's breathing. Feeding. And these capsules, he gestured weakly to the rows of glowing prisons. They are not for healing. They are for harvesting. My stomach turned. I looked back at the capsule with the man inside, his face pale, his body twitching as though connected to invisible strings. The thought formed before I could stop it. They weren't keeping these people alive out of mercy. They were extracting something. The gray figure's voice trembled. They take us, little by little. Our thoughts, our faces, our humanity. That's why the children have no features. They have nothing left to give. Only the symbols remain. I shuddered as the memory of the faceless children scratching glowing runes onto the walls returned to me. "And me?" I whispered. "Why am I here?" The figure leaned closer. His breath was cold against my ear. "Because you were chosen. They don't make mistakes. You've already begun to change." Confusion and fear collided in my chest. "Change? What do you mean?" "Look," he said, pointing toward the glass capsule beside us. For a moment, I didn't understand. Then I saw it in my reflection. But it wasn't my face. The features were mine, yet wrong. My skin shimmered faintly, glowing beneath the surface like light bleeding through cracks. My eyes glowed faintly white. And my mouth was forming words I wasn't speaking. The reflection whispered silently against the glass, perfectly synchronized with the man inside. "Run!" I stumbled backward, shaking my head violently. "No, that's not me! That's not real!" The gray-robed man's hand tightened on my arm. "It is real. The moment you entered, the city marked you. It is reshaping you. You will not leave unchanged." The hum in the walls deepened, now resonating inside my skull, my chest, my bones. It was as if the mountain itself agreed. My hand shook violently. I lifted them to my face and saw it, the faintest glow beneath my skin. Pulsing with the rhythm of the hum, I screamed and staggered back. The gray figure's eyes filled with a sorrow I couldn't comprehend. "You are one of us now." "No!" I shouted, my voice echoing against the stone. "I'm not." Before I could finish, the rest of the robed figures stepped forward in unison, their faces blank, their bodies rigid. The chamber darkened, the capsules flickering like dying stars. My reflection in the glass warped again, its features shifting into something unrecognizable, something inhuman. The figure who had warned me released my arm, stepping back into the crowd. "If you want to survive, you must leave. Now, before the city decides you are ready." The ground trembled, a deep rumble shaking dust loose from the ceiling. The stone doors around the chamber began to glow, their symbols blazing like fire. The voices from within the capsules rose in a horrible chorus, filling the chamber with a sound that was not human. I turned to run, but the passage I had entered was gone, sealed by seamless stone. And as the chamber filled with the hum, I realized there was no escape. The stone sealed behind me with a final groan, cutting off the only path I knew. My breath came in sharp bursts, echoing too loudly in the vast chamber of capsules. Hundreds of eyes, half open, unfocused, or lifeless, seemed to stare through the glass, all fixed on me. My skin crawled. The hum swelled until it was no longer sound, but pressure, crushing me from all sides. My bones vibrated, my vision blurred, and I collapsed to my knees. I pressed my palms against the floor, only to feel it pulsing beneath me like the heartbeat of something alive. No, this can't be happening," I muttered, though my voice was drowned in the roar. And then I felt it. My hands glowed faintly against the stone, veins of white light pulsing under my skin, synchronized perfectly with the rhythm of the hum. The same glow I had seen in the reflection earlier. My body was no longer mine. It was resonating with the city. I staggered to my feet. The gray-robed figures still lined the chamber, unmoving, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. Their faces were blank masks, yet their presence was suffocating, as though they were awaiting a signal to descend upon me. And then, as if on command, they began to move. Their steps were slow, synchronized, echoing like a drumbeat. Closer. Closer. Panic surged through me. I turned and ran between the rows of capsules, my footsteps clattering against the stone. The faces inside the glass twisted as I passed, mouths opening in silent screams, eyes darting frantically as if pleading with me. Their hands twitched against the glass, pounding weakly, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't help them. The chamber narrowed into another passage, sloping upward. I bolted toward it, lungs burning. The hum chased me like a predator, growing louder with every step. My chest seared, and I clutched at it. My heart was stuttering, halting, then starting again in unnatural rhythms, pulsing to the mountain's breath. The walls of the passage vibrated, glowing faintly with the same symbols I had seen the children draw. They pulsed in time with my heartbeat, as if guiding me forward, or perhaps binding me tighter to this place. Behind me, the gray figures advanced, their movements impossibly steady. They did not run, yet they gained ground, closing the distance no matter how fast I pushed myself. The passage opened into another vast hall. This one was different, an atrium carved directly from the mountain, its ceiling soaring so high that faint lights twinkled like stars above. Stone bridges crisscrossed the space, connecting platforms suspended over a bottomless pit. The hum rose from that abyss, deeper than ever, rattling the bridges as though the void itself was breathing. I sprinted across one of the bridges, my shoes scraping against the slick stone. The glow beneath my skin grew brighter, my hands trembling as if sparks were about to burst from my fingertips. My reflection in the polished stone surface showed a face that was no longer fully, mine features flickering, distorting, as though I was caught between two identities. On the opposite platform, I saw it. A gate. A massive set of stone doors, carved with spirals and circles, half open, as though someone or something had forced them ajar. Beyond them was a sliver of daylight. Freedom. I pushed my legs harder, lungs screaming, when the bridge shuddered violently. Cracks split through the stone, and a booming roar erupted from the depths below. The hum had become a voice, though I couldn't understand its words. It was calling me, pulling me back. I stumbled but pressed on, throwing myself across the last few steps. My shoulder slammed into the stone doors. They resisted, groaning, but I forced myself through the gap. Light seared my eyes. Fresh air hit my lungs like fire. I collapsed just beyond the threshold, gasping, clawing at the dirt beneath me. The real sunlight poured down, warm and blinding after the cold glow of the city. But the relief didn't last. Behind me, the stone doors began to close. The gray-robed figures emerged at the far end of the atrium, their steps echoing in perfect rhythm. Their blank faces locked onto me. I scrambled to my feet and ran, the heavy rumble of the doors shaking the ground. Dust filled the air. The gap narrowed. I threw myself forward, diving through the shrinking opening just as the stone slammed shut behind me with a thunderous crash. Silence. I lay sprawled on the ground outside, the taste of blood in my mouth, the warmth of the sun on my skin. I had made it out. I had escaped. Or so I thought. Because when I lifted my trembling hand to my face, I saw it. Carved into the flesh of my palm, glowing faintly, was a symbol. The same one the faceless children had drawn on the walls. The sunlight burned against my eyes, so bright it felt like knives piercing into my skull. For a moment I thought I had gone blind after so long in the stone city. I stumbled forward, clutching the dirt, trying to convince myself that I had made it, that I was free. The air was different here. It smelled of grass, of earth warmed by the sun, of wind that moved freely without walls to confine it. My lungs expanded with relief, yet every breath carried a strange aftertaste, metallic, sharp, like I had swallowed the mountain and it refused to let me go. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, but my hand froze when I saw it again, the symbol carved into my skin. A triangle with a circle in its center, glowing faintly beneath the surface of my flesh. I clawed at it, desperate to tear it away. But the glow only pulsed brighter, syncing with my heartbeat. "No," I whispered. "No, this isn't real. This isn't me." But it was. The mark was alive. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling, and turned back. My breath caught in my throat. The mountains were gone. Where once they had loomed high and terrible, now there was only empty horizon, a stretch of barren plains under the wide, merciless sky. The entrance I had escaped through had vanished. No doors, no stone, no trace that the city had ever existed. I staggered back, shaking my head violently. No, it was here. It was here. My screams carried across the plains, swallowed by the wind. But the more I looked, the more the doubt sank in. Had I imagined it? Had the city been real at all? Or had the mountains swallowed me whole and replaced my memories with a nightmare? I looked down at my hand again, at the glowing symbol. No, it was real. Too real. I tried to steady myself, to think rationally. If the city could vanish, it could reappear. If it had chosen me, then it wasn't done with me. The faceless children, the capsules, the humming that had felt like breath. It hadn't been an ending. It had been an introduction. My chest tightened. The glow beneath my skin spread, faint lines of light crawling up my arm like veins of fire. My heart skipped again, falling into that unnatural rhythm I had felt inside the mountain. I clutched my chest, gasping, terrified the next beat would never come. Then, faintly, I heard it. The hum. It wasn't as loud as before, not the overwhelming roar of a living mountain, but soft, hidden beneath the sound of the wind. A whisper in my bones. It followed me. I sank to my knees, clutching my marked hand, staring at the empty horizon where the mountains had stood. My mind spiraled. I thought of the gray-robed figures, the lifeless eyes behind the glass, the children scratching symbols on the walls. They hadn't been warning me. They had been preparing me. My vision blurred. I felt lightheaded, dizzy. When I wiped at my face, my fingertips came away glowing faintly. The mark wasn't just on my hand. It was spreading across me, branding me as one of theirs. I whispered into the emptiness. "What do you want from me?" No answer came. Only the faint hum, steady, patient, eternal. And then I understood. The city hadn't vanished. It had simply gone deeper, hidden from sight. It wasn't gone. It was inside me now. The mark was proof of that. I wasn't free. I was a tether, a beacon, a part of their experiment. Tears stung my eyes. I pressed my glowing hand into the dirt, leaving behind a faint imprint of the symbol in the soil. The ground pulsed once, faintly, before going still. I closed my eyes, trembling. From that day on, I knew one truth with absolute certainty. They would come back. And when they did, they wouldn't just take me. They would take everything. But that is a story for another time.